This is the Sabbath School lesson for the first quarter, 2022.
Welcome to Lesson 13, Let Brotherly Love Continue, ready for teaching on March 26. It's part of the series In These Last Days, The Message of Hebrews, authored by Dr. Felix Cortes, Associate Professor of New Testament Literature in the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary at Andrews University. And I'm your reader for today, Dr. Percy Harrold. Thursday, March 24, Go to Jesus outside the camp. Compare Hebrews 13:10-14, Mark 8:34, Matthew 10:38, Luke 14:25, and my favourite text in the whole Bible, Galatians 2:20. What does it mean to go to Jesus outside the camp? Hebrews 13, beginning at verse 10, We have an altar from which those who serve the tabernacle have no right to eat. For the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin are burned outside the camp. Therefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered outside the gate. Therefore let us go forth to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we have no continuing city, but we seek the one to come. And Mark 8:34, When he had called the people to himself, with his disciples also, he said to them, Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. And Matthew 10:38, And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. And Luke 14:28, And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. The place outside the gate was the most impure of the whole camp. The carcasses of the sacrificial animals were burned there. We read about this in Leviticus chapter 4 and verse 12. The whole bull he shall carry outside the camp to a clean place, where the ashes are poured out, and burn it on wood with fire. Where the ashes are poured out, it shall be burned. Lepers also were excluded from the camp. Leviticus 13:46. He shall be unclean. All the days he has the sore he shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. And blasphemers and other criminals were executed there. Leviticus 24:10-16. Now the son of an Israelite woman, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the children of Israel, and this Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel fought each other in the camp. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name of the Lord and cursed, and so they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelemith, and the daughter of Dibri, of the tribe of Dan. Then they put him in custody, that the mind of the Lord might be shown to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take outside the camp him who has cursed, then let all who heard him lay their hands on his head, and let all the congregation stone him. Then they shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, Whoever curses his God shall bear his sin, and whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him, the stranger as well as him who is born in the land. When he blasphemes the name of the Lord, he shall be put to death. And verse 23, Then Moses spoke to the children of Israel, and they took outside the camp him who had cursed, and stoned him with stones, so that the children of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses. And 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 13, And 2 men, scoundrels, came in and sat before him, and the scoundrels witnessed against him, against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth has blasphemed God and the king. Then they took him outside the city and stoned him with stones, so that he died. And Acts 7:58. And they cast him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at the feet of a young man named Saul. These regulations presupposed that the presence of God was within the camp. Anything that was impure was cast outside, because God was unwilling to see any unclean or indecent thing in it, as we read in Numbers chapter 5 and verse 3. You shall put out both male and female, you shall put them outside the camp, that they may not defile their camps in the midst of which I dwell. And Deuteronomy 23 verse 14, For the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp, to deliver you, and give your enemies over to you. Therefore your camp shall be holy, that he may see no unclean thing among you, and turn away from you. Jesus suffered on the cross outside Jerusalem, as we read in John 19:17-20, and he, bearing his cross, went out to a place called the place of the skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him and 2 others with him, one on either side, and Jesus in the centre. Now Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Then many of the Jews read this title, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. This emphasizes the shame that was cast upon him, as we read in Hebrews 12:2, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. He was officially condemned as one who had blasphemed the name, and therefore was repudiated by Israel and executed outside the wall, as we read in Mark 14:63-64. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, What further need do we have of witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? And they all condemned him to be deserving of death. And we'll compare that with Leviticus 24, verses 11 and 16. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name of the Lord and cursed, and so they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelemith, the daughter of Dibri, of the tribe of Dan. And verse 16, And whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him, the stranger as well as him who is born in the land. When he blasphemes the name of the Lord, he shall be put to death. Jesus was cast outside the camp as a shameful, unclean, or indecent thing, as you read in Hebrews 12:2, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Paul, however, exhorts believers to follow Jesus outside the gate, enduring the shame that he endured in that same verse. And Hebrews 13, verse 13, Therefore, let us go forth to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. This also was the path Moses followed. He chose to bear the reproach of Christ instead of the treasures of Egypt, as we read in Hebrews 11:26, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Paradoxically, however, Moses suggests that God's presence is now outside the camp. The action of following Jesus outside the camp means not only bearing his reproach or shame, but also going forth to him, as we've just read in Hebrews 13:13, just as those Israelites who sought the Lord went outside the camp in the desert when Moses removed God's tent from the camp after the golden calf controversy, as we read in Hebrews 33:7. Moses took his tent and pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone who sought the Lord went out to the tabernacle of meeting, which was outside the camp. This account suggests that the rejection of Jesus by unbelievers also implied the rejection of God, as Israel did in the golden calf apostasy in Exodus chapter 32 and Exodus chapter 33. Thus, the path of suffering and shame also is the path to God. Paul invites readers to follow Jesus as the author and finisher of their faith in Hebrews 12:2. Implicitly inviting them also to consider their present sufferings a momentary discipline that will yield the peaceable fruit of righteousness, as we read in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 11. Now, no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. They are leaving behind a corrupted city or camp in search of the city that is to come, whose architect is God, as we read in Hebrews 13:14. For here we have no continuing city, but we seek the one to come. And Hebrews 11 verse 10, for he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. And the same chapter, Hebrews 11 verse 16. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And so to finish today, what does it mean for you to follow Jesus outside the camp? What are those aspects of the life of faith in Jesus that may bring reproach or shame from those around you? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.